Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pod TV's Economics with David M. Walker, the former U.S. Comptroller General of the United States and the book author of 2040. 2040 Is the U.S. Still the Superpower? David Walker has spent his life serving America. He is now currently spending his time listening to people, observing the problems that the U.S. is facing with the economic situation, and finding solutions and taking it to Washington. He is also hosting a debate with other candidates that are not in the standard presidential election. I think this is just to help us see and understand that there are other smart people out there who can serve America that are not part of the two-party system, which might be the biggest solution we have in the United States. So I am your co-host today. Nick Palaveda is out traveling around the world. And I look forward to bringing on board David Walker. I don't see him in the studio just yet. So we'll continue talking about the debate coming up. I know that Steve Rao is working with David Walker on a few things. And we have a ad for his debate, which will be Wednesday, October 23rd, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And there you have it. What an exciting debate intro. And I am so looking forward to talking with David about the debate coming up, all of the reasons why they are doing this. And hopefully we will gain some insight on how we can make America a better place to live in. Welcome, David. How are you doing today?
Oh, well, Cam, how are you?
I'm doing great and looking forward to the debate this week.
Well, so am I. I'm flying out on Wednesday. It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, which would be 8 Eastern time. It's going to go for 2.5 hours, although we will have 30 minutes of commercials. So, you got to pay for it somehow, right?
Oh, well, congratulations on getting the commercials. To me, that's the hardest part of monetizing any show in this day and time. So
Right.
Let's talk about a little bit about, we don't want to blow any surprises or anything, but
No.
It is a debate, so there really shouldn't be any surprises. But let's talk a little bit about what you hope to gain by hosting a debate like this, because this is a huge undertaking.
Well, it is. And Christina Tobin from Free and Equal, she's really the person who came up with this idea. And this is actually the fourth debate that she's going to have held during this presidential election cycle. And in every debate, she invites every candidate that's on the ballot. There may be a minimum number of states, I'm not sure, but and all of these candidates are on the ballot with varying numbers of states, which we can come back to. And she invites the major party candidates too, but historically the only ones that have accepted are minor party candidates. The major party candidates aren't even going to debate as much as they should debate for the benefit of the American people. So they've been invited. Christina talks about maybe having an empty podium for the two major party candidates. I don't know if she will or not, but I'm pretty sure they're not going to be showing up. And so the real issue is, we want people to be able to have choice. And we don't want their choices to be limited to the two major parties. And we want people to focus on the future and focus on issues. And so I can assure you that this debate, unlike some others, will be focused on the future and will be focused on issues rather than the past and personalities. And it's it's rather frustrating right now because, we're down to about the last 2 weeks of the campaign, and things seem to be getting more personal and than they really should be for a presidential campaign. And you won't see that at this debate. People are very respectful of each other, and we're going to get them to focus on the issues of concern to the American people.
And again, these are more on the issues, not the characteristics, the personalities, everything that everyone has been pointing fingers at, but just how do we fix the problems we have, right?
Right. And we're going to focus on the issues that the American people are most concerned about. I mean, those are issues like the economy, and there's a number of different sub issues associated with the economy, issues like border security and immigration, issues like international stability, issues like domestic tranquility, issues like abortion. I mean, these are the biggest issues that the American people are focused on, and therefore you can expect that a disproportionate amount of our time will be focused on those issues. And we're going to limit how much time the candidates have to respond in order to try to get as many questions in as we can. But we're also going to try to make sure that they actually answer the question that's asked.
Thank you.
Right. I mean, that's a novel concept, right? I mean, it's nice if they came from a middle class family or if they worked in McDonald's for a day or, whatever. But that's not really what we want to hear about.
No, we don't want their campaign message. We want the answers.
Right.
And in every one of the debates so far, it seems like everyone's trying to squeeze in their campaign rather than the answers. And it was very irritating as the viewer to sit there and go, but that wasn't the question.
Right.
So I agree with you. I'm glad that you're hosting this. I know it's going to be a challenge, but also a lot of fun. Because we don't have to make this angry at each other and everything else. We can show that people can unite and give answers, whether they oppose each other or not.
So you know, Kim, I attended the last debate, which was part of the Freedom Forum in Las Vegas back this summer, and each candidate was very respectful of each other, and the tone and tenor of the debate was very different from what you get from some of the major candidate debates.
Right, and I think that that's very important to show their character as well, but also just to show that they're willing to discuss things and work things through. You don't have to fight and argue and kind of demonize each other. You can actually say we all have different opposing views, but we can find a solution. And so what does it take to pull something like this together? And we've got some guests that are joining us, so we'll get to them here in a minute. But what is the undertaking you have gone through to do this?
Well, Christina is the person that's really pulled it all together. Just so you know, I'm the co-moderator.
Okay.
I'm not the co-producer. And she and her not-for-profit Free and Equal are the ones that have done all the work here. I was pleased to be asked to co-moderate, and I'm looking forward to it. But clearly, you have to be able to get adequate financing, and the lead sponsor for the last debate, and may well be the lead sponsor for this debate, was Joe from Texas. That's joefromtexas.com. Joe's a good friend of mine. He is a very successful entrepreneur from Beaumont, Texas, who's very concerned about the current state and future direction of our country, in particular with regard to financial and fiscal matters. He has sponsored a number of events, not just the Free and Equal debate, last one and this one, but also the Tucker Carlson tour. He was a major sponsor of the Tucker Carlson tour. He's given speeches with me and around the country. And so that's a big part of it. But logistics were a big part to be able to decide, where you're going to end up having the event, and do you have the necessary, electronic equipment, broadcasting capabilities, and everything else that are necessary, and then how many different outlets are you going to be able to broadcast on? One of which is our outlet, right? I mean, Pod TV is going to broadcast it. C-SPAN is going to broadcast it.
Yeah.
Humble is going to broadcast it. There's a nationwide radio station that's going to broadcast it. There are several, so there are going to be several outlets. And then obviously you got to get the candidates to show up, right? So we have 3 candidates that have accepted. The Constitution Party candidate, Randall Terry, the Libertarian Party candidate, Chase Oliver, and the Green Party candidate, Dr. Jill Stein. And at some point, we ought to talk a little bit about what those parties are all about and see how that might play into, the nature of the debate.
Well, and we will do that. What I'd like to do is share with everyone Joe from Texas site. He also has a contract. I signed it about, making our leaders more accountable. So you can go to joefromtexas.com and you can sign his contract, which I think every citizen of this country should sign, because it's making our leaders accountable for the actions and for what is happening to us. Because when you hire somebody to do a job and they fail to do that job, they get fired usually. So
yeah, let's talk a little bit, Kim, about how this contract came about.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah, Joe and I worked together to develop this contract. And importantly, it doesn't say contract for the American people. It says contract from the American people. And very intentionally, it says that. And why does it say that? Because I've done, fiscal forums in 47 states, the District of Columbia, a couple of territories of the United States, and several countries. All right. And Joe has done a number of speaking events as well. So what we did is we combined our collective experience and we ended up, pulling this together. They represent 10 of the most important issues that the American people want our elected officials to address, whether they be the president, whether they be the Senate or the House, and then a way forward to be able to address them. Everybody ought to take a look at it. If they're comfortable with it, they ought to sign it. We're also making sure that the major party and minor party candidates, for our nation's highest office, are exposed to it, encouraging them to embrace it as well. But we do need more transparency and accountability. And that's part of what this is all about. But I want to reemphasize it's the contract from the American people because it's based on what they told us rather than what we told them.
And, and I think that that's very important for us to emphasize on that. And, can we play the video? Would you mind if we played the video for a minute?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
The national debt's completely out of control. Look at the programs we have that we don't really need. Look at the waste. Look at the fraud. You can't keep adding this on to the backs of the American people, the taxpayers. It's wrong. I want to educate people about what's going on. They say our economy is sound. Well, that's a lie. There's no reason to lie to the American people anymore. But I don't think the politicians are going to tell you the truth. That's why I'm working to do something about it. Let's save America. Go to joefromtexas.com and help me spread the word.
And, that's what it takes is people who are willing to get out there and kick the dirt around and get the information out to the people, but also raise the awareness, right? A lot of people don't know that these programs exist. They're no labels pretty much, right? Like they're not really for any particular party. They're for the people.
Yeah, they're not partisan at all. And Joe is, as I said, a very successful entrepreneur from Texas. He doesn't have Ross Perot's money or name recognition. but he's trying to do things similar to what Ross did back in the 90s. And as you may know, Kim, Ross was a friend of mine,
Yep.
and he was the primary funder of the 10 million a minute tour that I did in 2012, which went to 27 states, covered 10,000 miles, and was the basis of a lot of the information in my latest book, which is American 2040: Still a Superpower ? Where we found out that the American people understand that we're on an imprudent and unsustainable path. They can accept tough choices if they're part of a comprehensive goal-based plan consistent with principles and values that bring people together rather than divide them apart. And we got 77 to 97% agreement on specific reforms in areas like the budget, taxes, Social Security, Medicare, healthcare, defense, government organization operations, political reforms. And so the people are there. They want leadership. And the biggest deficit that we have right now is a leadership deficit.
A laggership, as you always call it. And I agree.
We have too many laggards in politics, not enough leaders.
Well, and I've noticed that with the what I feel like, and I don't want to really hit on this much, but like the hurricane relief situation, if they need more funding, will it be there because Congress has decided to sit out until after the elections, which I think is poor leadership on anyone. If there's a national disaster like the one we've experienced, I think all hands on deck. I mean, that's my philosophy.
Yeah, well, it's important to understand there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation out there about
Right.
different issues. I mean, basically what the Congress did and the president signed was what's called a continuing resolution, which basically funds these agencies at the same level as the prior year. And so therefore they should have enough money to be able to deal with the current situation through the election. They are coming back after the election. And so to the extent that additional funding is needed, they'll have an opportunity, and I would argue an obligation, to deal with that when they return. But finally, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, admitted that they have enough money right now, but they're going to need more than what they expected they would need for the entire year because of what's transpired already so early this fiscal year.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot. We have two guests in the house right now. There'll be more potentially coming later. But let's talk about, let's talk about the three parties that
Sure.
are being, because we need to understand them.
Well, first, let's go in alphabetical order. You have the Constitution Party, and needless to say, being named the Constitution Party, they're very focused on the Constitution of the United States, principles in that document, the principles dealing with the Declaration of Independence, therefore limited government, and in addition to that, they're also for stewardship, because keep in mind one of the most important issues in the preamble of the Constitution is that we're trying to secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity, and posterity means future generations. And unfortunately, current politicians are not doing that with regard to our finances, with regard to environmental and several other issues, if you will. The second is the Green Party. And frankly, I couldn't find a mission statement for them, but I did find some of their key values. And I'll mention just a few: social justice and equal opportunity, ecological wisdom, nonviolence, diversity, sustainability. And I want, speaking of the word sustainability, one of the things that I try to make sure that our young people know about is, look, I know they're concerned about environmental sustainability. Climate change is real. Mankind does play some role in that. At the same point in time, our young people aren't paying enough attention to fiscal sustainability because, quite frankly, that will have much bigger ramifications much quicker than the environmental one is. And so we need to focus on both, not just one, because they're ultimately going to be the ones that are going to pay the price and bear the burden if we don't put our finances in order. And the third party is the Libertarian Party. Needless to say, they focus on the key term liberty. They believe, in individual rights, in limited government, and it's important to also understand how many states are these candidates on the ballot for. In the case of the Libertarian Party, they're on the ballot for 47 states, so they clearly, have the potential to reach 270 votes. The Green Party's on the ballot in 37 states, and they have the ability to reach 270 electoral votes. The Constitution Party is only on the ballot in 12 states, and so they really are not in a position to get that. But when I asked them on a podcast call that we had, about a week ago, in preparing for this, why are they running? It's really more to promote their party, to gain and keep ballot access, and to promote the principles and values for which their party stands for. They recognize that they're not going to win the election. They may or may not have an impact on the outcome in certain states. And as we all know, there's only about 7 states right now that are up for grabs. And the polls in all of those 7 states are within the margin of error. So only God knows what's going to end up happening, and God's not telling us. So we'll have to wait until no earlier than the late evening of November 5th to find out.
Maybe later than that and everything, depending
Getting on pins and needles.
Probably.
depending on how contested it is and everything. Maybe wait until the 6th or the 7th or who knows when and everything. But I did have a question for you, David, and it's kind of alluded to it on the earlier show, the news show and everything. And you may not know this and everything, but I actually did have a friend that ran for vice president under one of those lesser parties, and actually we worked together for a brief period and everything. He actually ran under a party that stood absolutely no chance of winning. And when I explain the party, you'll understand why I say that and everything. But one of the things that people are asked, whether it was my friend Lamont Lilly, who literally ran as vice president for the Workers' World Party, which, as you know, is the Communist Party, and everything along those lines, or whether it is others. A lot of times people are afraid that it is a throwaway vote and everything. So what do you say to folks that are going to tune into the debate, this particular debate, and are concerned that if they vote for a Jill Stein or if they vote for somebody like a Workers' World, that they are literally throwing their vote away?
Well, first, about 70% of American voters aren't happy with the 2 major party candidates.
Agreed.
And so they really have to make a decision on, are they going to choose between those 2 major party candidates? Are they going to consider one of these candidates? Or are they going to write in somebody else? The truth is that there's only about 7 states that are in play. And so if you're not in one of those 7 states, then you can vote your conscience. You can either vote for one of the 2 major party candidates, one of these 3 candidates, or write in somebody. Quite frankly, I've written in twice since 2000. And so you have that option. If you are, however, in a swing state, then you need to think about it more seriously, because the margins are so close in the swing states that how much of the vote that one or more of these minor party candidates might pull could be the difference between who ends up taking that state. And so I think it's a different situation depending upon where you live. But ultimately, you need to feel comfortable with what your vote is. But the most important thing is vote. And I can say with a straight face that I have never missed a vote since I became eligible to vote. It's a right, it's a privilege, and it's something that one needs to exercise. Rick, I know you. Ken, why don't you moderate everything? You can call on people, okay?
All right,
Okay, well, Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, we know the 2 major candidates that balancing the budget is way down their list of things to address. Are the third-party candidates any better at addressing deficit?
Actually, it's interesting, Rick. I appreciate you answering that question. And you're correct that the 2 major party candidates have not focused on how are we going to put our finances in order in a sane and sustainable method. And in fact, a number of the things that they proposed would make things worse. And a number of the things that they propose, quite frankly, aren't politically feasible. They make promises on things that they want to do that would not get garner the necessary votes in the Senate and/or House in order to become law. I looked and saw that a couple of the ones, in fact, all three of them, one way or the other, talk about limited government and sustainability. Okay, and to me, sustainability includes fiscal sustainability. And so, based on the last debate that I saw, they seem to be more concerned about this issue than the major party candidates are. And I can understand why the major party candidates may not want to get into a lot of details about what are they going to do in order to, put our finances in order. But at a minimum, they ought to say that, it's a major problem, that they'll make it a priority, and which they haven't done yet. Okay. And that talk about a way forward, such as a constitutional amendment, which we absolutely need to have, which I'm working on, and a statutory fiscal commission, which we clearly need as a way to engage the people and set the table for a tough vote. At a minimum, they ought to be able to do that. But I can say that based upon my experience with these three candidates, they seem to be more concerned about it than the major party candidates are.
Well, I want to say, David, you've been more concerned about it than any leadership we have in Congress, Senate, or even our presidents. I mean, nobody seems to want to address it. I think they fear it. You don't fear it, but I think the economy is something they fear. It's too big. Go ahead, Mark. What's your question?
Quickly, one of the things that I know has been brought up a lot of times on politics in general, and also brought up in the main two parties and everything, is this notion of a division. And I know that some of the candidates, including some of the third party candidates, have been somewhat seen as divisive. I mean, I think of some of the things that Jill Stein has said and all along those lines. So I just wondered, is the debate going to touch it all on the division of the country? And there's this notion of strange bedfellows. Politics made strange bedfellows. And I know that Jill Stein has got some endorsements that are unusual in terms of where they are coming from, in terms of the far right, and she's probably considered the far left. So I just wondered, are you going to touch on that at all in the debate?
Well, we're going to try to make it future focused and policy oriented rather than, focused on the past and personalities. Okay. And I feel confident that we'll be able to do that. I will note that in the last debate that took place as part of the Freedom Forum in Las Vegas this summer, that while Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Did not participate in the debate, he did speak right before the debate and made his case. And the reason he said he didn't participate in the debate is because, he didn't want to do anything that would reflect negatively on those candidates, because he felt that they were trying to express their views and their position or whatever else, and he was looking to be able to debate the major party candidates. Of course, Kennedy was polling a lot better and was on an adequate number of states in order to be able to get 270 electoral votes. And as you know, as you say about strange bedfellows, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has endorsed Trump, which was not expected, but did happen.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, Rick.
do you have any advice for these candidates to increase their footprint and presence in American political life? For instance, like, I don't think Cornel West or Jill Stein has ever held any elective office.
No, that's right. Well, first, Cornel West was invited, as well as the two major party candidates. I think there was one other person that was invited, but they didn't accept. One of the things that they need to do is they need to take advantage of every major media opportunity that they're offered. Okay, every major one, because the big issue, Rick, as you know, is name recall. All right, and I will tell you that. When I went to the last debate in Las Vegas, at least, some really good points were made. All right. Some really good points were made that were substantive, that made sense. But the problem is most people don't know who these candidates are. They may not know what these parties are. They may not know what they stand for, if you will. And so the big thing is they just need to get more public exposure. And I know that, for example, when I asked Chase Oliver, who's the Libertarian Party, and as I mentioned to you, they're on 47 state ballots. And part of his objective is to be able to stay on those ballots without having to do petitioning and to hopefully be able to increase. And in order to be able to do that, you've got to get a certain percentage of the vote in each of the states in order to automatically be able to be qualified. So, name recalls, and platform recall is a big part of what this is all about. It just means you need to, you need as much exposure as you can get.
The libertarians don't seem like, almost by definition, aren't very organized.
Well, they're decentralized, but so is the Green Party. The Green Party is very decentralized, and frankly, the Constitution Party is not well known at all, and they're only on 12 state ballots.
And that's actually where I was going to go, because you mentioned Ross Perot, and I actually had some admiration to some degree for Ross Perot, but also I had admiration for what she tried to do. Lenora Fulani, who tried to run a campaign sometime back on the more liberal side and left side, if you want to say, and everything. What advice would you give to these candidates? I know you try to be, and obviously do a very good job of being a nonpartisan here on this show, as well as on other times that you've been on other shows as well and everything. But what advice would you give to them based on your experience that you've seen in order for them to be more active and to have a stronger footprint?
Well, I think you have to be future focused and solutions oriented. And I think you have to, you have to deal and address the issues and concerns of the American people. For example, I gave you an example of the top issues that the American people are concerned about, and that's based upon extensive polling as well as personal interaction. And so you need to recognize that reality, and you need to be able to say, what you would do in order to try to be able to make things better in each of those areas that the people are concerned about. As you know, I'm one of the national co-founders of No Labels, and we thought very seriously about running, a third option, unity ticket option for president, and because there was such a high degree of dissatisfaction among the voters for the two major party candidates at that time, and there's still a high degree of dissatisfaction now, although you've got one party made a substitute, if you will. And we were going to run an issue-oriented, solutions-based campaign, unity ticket, focused on the issues of major concern to the American people, and how to address those issues. If you look at the campaign now, too much of it is based upon the past. Too much of it is based upon personalities. Not enough of it is based upon the future and solutions to the challenges that we face. We're in what I call the silly season, where people are doing whatever they can to try to win, in many cases making promises that they're not going to be able to deliver on because of what I call political feasibility. And what do I mean by political feasibility? Unless you're on budget reconciliation, you got to get 60 votes in the Senate. And I can tell you, no matter what happens on this election, no party's going to have close to 60 votes in the Senate. And I think it's more likely than not that the Republicans will take the Senate, but we'll see. In the House, you've got to be able to pass the House. And it's very open as to which party is going to control the House. You may see a flip in that, but whoever wins the House, it ain't going to be by much, okay? And then you have to get the signature of the president, right? So, it's easy to make promises. And then some of the promises, quite frankly, that are being made are unconstitutional. So, some of the promises that are being made, whether it be with regard to student loans or providing, forgivable loans to certain segments of the population based upon their race or gender or other factors, that's blatantly unconstitutional. You can't do that. And yet that doesn't keep people from making those promises. And then some of the promises that are being made by both sides are politically popular, especially on the tax side. Don't tax this, don't tax that. Remember the old story: don't tax you, don't tax me, tax the person behind the tree. So we both sides are making those kinds of promises. They're very popular, but they make the fiscal situation worse. In many cases, there's no way they're going to pass.
No. And they're making fake promises, and this should not be allowed. I mean, they're making promises to people who are desperately seeking a solution to their own problems. I mean, kind of like no tax on tips. Honestly, I think that's a stupid promise because you're incentivizing people to keep lower income jobs instead of growing out of those jobs by giving them, a no tax platform. But I think that there's just a lot of fake promises because they feel like this is what the people want to hear, not what they need to hear. And I believe
that's the big difference, Kim, between a campaign and governing. Okay, right. That's the big difference. And by the way, if that passes, and I doubt that it will, and by the way, both major candidates have promised that. Okay, if that passes, then all I want is tips.
I know. I told Nick, change my income to tips.
You're already
right on it.
An increasing pain in the ass where you go into stores now and all you do is bring your items to the cashier and the cashier wants a tip for just ringing up your stuff. And then you have to decide, well, is that fair? Is that something we should have been doing all along for fairness? And I don't want to think about every transaction, what degree of tip has to be involved.
Well, let me tell you what, if this was to become law, you'd be seeing it a lot more than what you're seeing.
Right. And the other thing I've noticed, and it's a little off track here, but looking at my receipts lately, I have noticed another item added, and it's whether you paid by cash or not.
Mm-hmm.
Which
that's justified because the credit card company takes 2 or 3%.
Right.
So I'm okay with that.
Well, but in the past, regulations stated that credit cards could not impose their fees and debts on the actual purchase. I mean, that used to be a regulation. I don't know if it exists anymore as law or not. But I just found it interesting that I found this new additional item, whether I paid cash or not. And, and also are they counting the cash registers now because of, like by itemizing that way. So I think our country has become a very weird place to live. They don't behave this way in other countries. They have better health care that's free or a lot so affordable you don't need insurance. So, I mean, we're not focused on the health of the country. We're just not.
Can I mention one thing real quick on the tips issue? First, Rick is right that if you end up using a credit card, there's a charge which varies by credit card company, which is an issue not just for the restaurant or the bar, but also the waiter and other staff. Okay, but the other issue is a lot of times they would prefer that you tip in cash because all of that may not get reported.
Right.
Which is illegal. Okay, it's tax evasion, not tax avoidance, but there's no question that a certain percentage of cash tips don't get reported.
Also, if you pay in cash, your boss can't steal your tips because sometimes
that's true. That's true, unless they frisk you at the end of that shit.
Well, they're shy of frisking, but they do require everyone to turn in their tips, and then they issue credit cards to each of their employees, and I guess they go ahead and deduct the tax out of the tips, and then you go cash your card out for whatever was left over. So that's been the way of some of the places here. I don't know if it's like that in every state.
I don't know. So, just really quickly, one of the things that people have been alluding to in the main campaign or in the two parties and everything is the whole notion of the importance of the women's vote and the importance of the minority vote and everything. So I was just wondering, is that something that y'all are going to tackle in the debate, and what are some of the stances that these three candidates are taking? Because I know that even Kamala Harris has talked about this kind of like massive loan that she's going to give to African American business entrepreneurs and everything along those lines. So I just wondering if you heard from the three candidates as to what their stances is on women's rights and on minority rights.
Well, the Green Party is very focused on some of those issues with regard to feminism and gender equity and diversity issues, et cetera. So I would expect that if an opportunity comes up for somebody to do that, I don't expect that would be a question that we would ask about that. On the issue that you just talked about, where Vice President Harris is proposing to give forgivable loans to segments of the population based in part on race, many would argue, including me, that that's unconstitutional. You can't do that. All right. And the same thing happens with regard to, I think it's unconstitutional, period, but I definitely don't think it would get through the Congress. And that's not something the president could do unilaterally, which the president has tried to do with regard to student loans, has gotten struck down by the Supreme Court, although it was for everybody. It wasn't just for male or female or, based upon race or gender or, other preference, if you will. So I don't think that's something that we're likely to cover. But I do know that the Green Party is focused on equity and diversity. That's part of their mission.
I noticed something new on the platform. Maybe it just came out at the last minute, as some things do. We have the abortion issue, and the country is well divided on that. But it's the IVF, because of the recent Supreme Court rulings that the embryos are considered children, and they're being massively killed at massive rates using the IVF. Now, I'm neither nor. I think everything should be a parent's choice. And so I kind of, let people make up their own decisions of what's going on. But you had Trump campaigning on, he's the father of IVF, and God, I hope that doesn't mean that he is the father of all the embryos. But I'm just wondering, is this a big issue with your parties?
The embryos come from the woman, don't they? I think so. So let me.
Well, so the embryos, they fertilize them, of course, and then they are considered children. They're frozen until they're used. So I don't know a lot about IVF. I just feel like, all of this, including abortion, should just be whoever is in the situation making the decisions. But will this be something that your parties discuss? Because it's becoming a new and up and coming factor.
Well, I would say that the abortion issue or and related factors, including IVF and rights, rights of the woman. I think that's clearly one of the top 10 issues for this campaign. So I wouldn't be surprised if it came up.
It's just interesting because of the way the Supreme Court defined everything. And now all of a sudden you hear a lot of people talking about it. And it just caught my attention.
It seems to me, Cam, on that, there's at least two dimensions to that. One of which is, should there be any restrictions on in vitro fertilization? And I would say a significant regard, I'm talking about on that practice, period, okay? And I think a significant majority of the American people would say no. You have to keep in mind that our birth rate is 1.62. That means we have a declining population. We need 2.1 to stabilize the population, absent immigration. And there are some couples that can't have kids the normal way, and therefore providing them an option is very viable. So that's one thing, and I would think a significant majority of Americans would be for that as an option. Then there's the issue of what do you do if you destroy them? Okay, that's a different issue. And it's a very different issue, and I'm sure that opinion on that is very split.
Well, and they sell them and trade them and swap them. So somebody had brought up, it sounds like human trafficking of children to me, but I don't, I think you can stretch the laws too thin or too broad and miss the common sense. And like you mentioned, some people can't have babies any other way. This was their alternative. But if you're defining children being a certain way, then you have to do it across the board. So, and I thought the Supreme Court's ruling really made a lot of changes for, in fact, a lot of IVF facilities started to close down or shut down because they said that they can't afford the lawsuits that they're going to get hit with. And
I think, I know you're going to go to Rick, but I think one key concept that we need to keep in mind when you're dealing with reproductive rights and abortion and things of that nature is the concept of viability. The person viable, all right? And that's something that I think a vast majority of Americans could agree with. I'm a Roman Catholic, okay, and the church believes that there's a life from conception. At the same point in time, it's also very clear that there's not viability for a period of time. And therefore, what some people argue is there ought to be a safe harbor and that, women ought to be able to do whatever they want up until the point of realistic viability. And then beyond that, it ought to be severely restricted. Okay. By the way, a lot of times people say, rape, incest, and life of the mother, right? Well, you'll know whether it's rape or incest right off, right? I mean, that you'll know right off. Life of the mother, that could occur after the point of viability. And so that's something you'd still have to have as a basis, right? The physical life of the mother. So I think there are reasonable ways to address this. And I think one of the things a lot of people don't think about is there's a difference between the law, ethics, and morality. The law is for everybody.
Right.
Ethics should be, but it's not. And morality definitely isn't. And therefore, when you're a legislator, you're legislating the law, which applies to everybody, okay? But you're trying to lift people up to be more ethical and more moral. But you can't legislate morality.
Or religion. Yes, Rick.
So somebody told me, read the language of Roe. And I read up on it, and there was actually the whole idea of trimesters, which we're familiar with now, was built into Roe to address viability, that in the third trimester, you just can't get rid of a fetus or a baby willy-nilly. And that was based on, at the time Roe was passed, the viability began at the end of the second trimester. Now with better technology, you can get babies that are 20, 21 weeks to survive. That's thing one. Thing two is God gets rid of more embryos than anybody else. Half of all fertilized eggs don't make it to birth.
Well, and there are also drugs that you can take, that
prevent
that would deal with the issue as well, that are legal, okay, if you will. And that's an area of controversy as well. Mark's got his hand up.
Yeah, I had a quick question for you. Yeah, I had a quick question for you again and everything. I know my questions are always quick. One, I have to thank you because I knew that was the reason I liked you, David, and everything. It's because you're a Catholic, and even though I'm not a Catholic, I did go to that Jesuit university, and I'm a proud Marquette graduate, and all along those lines. So definitely proud of my Catholic connection and everything along those lines. But my quick question for you and everything was, one of the things that's been talked a lot about economics, and I wonder how y'all are going to address that, and the debate on whether y'all are going to address it, is the whole notion of what's going on in our foreign affairs, but particularly our economics with foreign affairs with BRICS and everything. So just wondering how much of that is y'all going to talk about is the BRICS alliance, and also how it's impacting our relationship to other countries.
Well, there's a possibility it could come up, and it's interesting, Mark, because the BRICS are meeting this week.
Right.
And they're meeting this week in Russia. And one of the things that they're talking about is the possibility of creating an additional reserve currency that would be backed 40% by gold and 60% by a basket of other currencies. You've got other countries that are joining the BRICS now. And I personally believe that our leaders are not taking that seriously enough. And I also saw within the last 24 hours, what's happening with regard to interest rates associated with Treasury debt and the difference in the supply and demand with regard to what we need to sell and finance, and the appetite for people to be able to buy our debt. This is another complicating factor that could make things a lot tougher with regard to the interest rate that we have to pay. I've said before, I don't think the U.S. is going to lose reserve currency status, but based upon how we've been acting and based upon our absence of taking steps to put our finances in order, then I think we're going to lose market share. And the more market share you lose, the higher you're going to have to pay on interest, the less advantages you have on trade, and the less ability you have to impose economic sanctions on rogue nations.
If I can ask just one follow-up question and everything, how important do you think it is going to be because I grew up in rural North Carolina, even though I was born here in Durham, North Carolina and everything, how important do you think it is going to be for the rural parts of our environment to listen to this debate on the 23rd, and what kind of issues do you think will be addressed specifically toward our rural community?
Well, it's difficult to say. I mean, look, I think whether you're urban or rural, whether you're north, whether you're south, no matter what your political affiliation is, if you want to have, if you want to hear discussion and debate about issues that are of concern to the American people, then this is something you ought to be interested in. And if you've not made up your mind about who you're going to vote for, this is definitely something you ought to be interested in. We'll see what kind of attendance we get. I mean, realistically, these candidates know that they're not going to get 270 electoral votes. Some of them aren't even on enough balance to be able to do that. And you're not going to have people write in names to the extent that you're going to end up winning a state. That's just not going to happen.
No,
in 2025, where will you be directing your efforts, given we'll have a closely divided Senate and a nearly tied House?
Well, the two things that I'm spending most of my time on right now as it relates to the fiscal issue is the need for a commission, a statutory commission that would engage the American people with the facts, the truth, the tough choices, solicit input, set the table for a tough vote dealing with mandatory spending, discretionary spending, and revenues. I think that's essential as a way to get a jump start on what we need to do. The people are way ahead of the politicians. The second thing I'm working on is to get a constitutional amendment that would limit how much debt as a percentage of the economy we can take on, absent unexpected and extraordinary circumstances. There's two ways to get that. One's the old-fashioned way through the Congress, 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate, pass something, they send it to the states for ratification. The other way is the states come together for a convention of states to propose one or more amendments, and then if they can agree on something by a majority, simple majority vote, they can send it to the states for ratification of standard procedure. I think based on work that I and just a few others have been doing, I think there's a good chance the states are going to sue the Congress by the end of this year for failure to call a convention of states as far back as 1979, when we exceeded the number required for a convention and Congress didn't do anything.
I know we're ending really quickly and everything, and I think we're going to play that commercial again of the debate, but is there going to be any conversation about the minimum wage? Because I know that I've had some friends involved in that minimum wage fight trying to lift it, because I think it's been trying to be lifted for decades and now and everything. So I was wondering, is that going to come up in the conversation as well?
We'll see. That's clearly an economic issue, right? We'll see. To be determined.
So California, I just turned in my ballot, and we're voting on whether to raise the minimum wage in the state to $17 and then $18, and the federal minimum wage is still $7.25, which is just 40% of what the wage is going to be in California. It's crazy low.
Yeah, it is. I'm not sure, quite frankly, Rick, how many people actually get the federal minimum wage. As you know, there are a lot of states that have minimum wages that are much higher than the federal minimum wage. And as you know, the earned income tax credit, was designed as a way to try to help lower wage individuals without requiring raising the minimum wage. So it's a lot more complicated factor. But I agree with you. It hasn't been raised in a long time. And,
also, if you're a tipped employee, you can work for as little as $2 an hour because your boss says, yeah, you're going to make it up in tips. And do you? I don't, if you got big boobs and you work at Hooters, maybe, but.
Well, I don't qualify for that personally, but at any rate, the other issue is, should we be doing what Europe does, which is, paying people a decent wage to be servers, and for them not to have to rely on tips. And if you want to give them a tip, it's for truly extraordinary circumstances, rather than exceptional service, rather than that's just how they get paid for them.
Yeah, then yeah, we should, because then you don't have to play jerk roulette. Like a table sits down and you find out they're from frickin' Amsterdam and they don't understand tipping. So you're going to serve them for 90 minutes and they're going to leave you 5%, not because they're jerks, but because they don't understand. Or some people are jerks and they'll just stiff you.
On the other hand, if you're in Europe, they hope you're an American and you don't know the difference in their system. You'll give them a 20% tip. All right. So it works on both sides of the pond.
But, in other countries, they do pay better. And that was something I enjoyed about traveling, was never worrying about the tip unless I really wanted to. But the meals and everything were so affordable that if I did tip, it didn't hurt me or bother me. And the services, if I was served, like if I went to go get some kind of service, hair or a pedicure or manicure, the services were so low in cost, I didn't mind tipping. But I don't think it, like David, like you say, I don't think it should have to be. And I think that we do need to increase the incomes of these people, because I'm tired of hearing them complain that they don't make enough money unless people tip more. I am just tired of it. I think we just need, and by saying that you're not going to tax them, all you do is try to encourage them to stay at a low income rather than inspire them to grow out of this problem. But David, I want to just say thank you for what you're doing for our country by bringing up this awareness, and also by participating in the Free and Equal Debate, October 23rd, 8 p.m., where any and all participants are welcome to come and join in the debate. And so, both parties were also invited, but we're going to get to hear some real solutions, real problems, and real answers, not dodging them. David, you got any last words you want to say?
Tune in. It'll be worth your time.
I'm going to tune in. And everyone, please be safe, get out there and go vote, because that is the one freedom that you do have that they can't take away from you yet.
Turn out.